we were just looking at a stat that shows that we've sold as many sub $20,000 cars this year as we did in 2023 already.
Welcome to the Car Dealership Guy Market Update, a monthly discussion with automotive industry experts and dealers about where our car market is today and where it may be headed. Today, I'm speaking with Jessica Caldwell, Head of Insights at Edmunds, and Zach Kinch, General Manager of Rohrman Toyota. Don't forget to click subscribe so you never miss an episode. But before we get into the show, the Car Dealership Guy Market Update is brought to you by Edmunds. In today's automotive landscape, car buyers invest more time than ever in researching, considering, and comparing options. But for dealers, the challenge lies in pinpointing the audience ready to make a purchase. Enter Premier by Edmunds. Premier offers dealers a groundbreaking way to connect with in-market car shoppers precisely when, where, and how they prefer. With over 20 million monthly visits, Edmunds.com is the go-to destination for buyers seeking market insights, expert advice, and budget tools to make informed decisions. These shoppers aren't just informed, they're laser-focused on the exact car they want. Now, it's your chance to make that connection. Through Edmunds Premier, dealers gain access to this highly coveted audience. Simply list your new and used inventory on Edmunds and watch as qualified in-market traffic flows directly to your vehicle detail pages on your website. Don't miss out on this opportunity to elevate your dealership's visibility and sales performance. You can sign up for Premier today at edmunds.com/CDG. And here's a special offer only for CDG listeners. New customers signing up through edmunds.com/CDG will receive an exclusive 50% off pricing for the first 90 days. Again, visit edmunds.com/CDG or click the link in the show notes below. All right, we're back. Episode 3 of the Car Dealership Guy Market Update. As usual, I'm co-hosted here with Jessica Caldwell, Head of Insights at Edmunds. Today, we also have Zach Kinch from Rohrman Toyota. Zach, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Zach, particularly excited to have you on because you are very active in social. I went down the rabbit hole actually right before the pod, and I've known you're active because you're in the process of doing an engagement with Russ, another automotive influencer that we're working with. But you have really, really taken it up a notch on social. Would love to dive into that, and if you could tell us, a bit why you even got started with that. In addition to that, you also have a podcast now, which you started telling me about before we pressed record, which I want to know about that as well. So kick us off with that, right? Why are you getting into the podcast world? Why is a GM at a Toyota dealership getting into content? What's going on?
Yeah, I think so. So I've been 10 years at this store, so it's starting to get to the point where I feel like I know where operations should be, the direction, where we need to be going. So it's kind of that outlook. How do we grow the business in a different way? And since I've come to the Rohrman organization, the mindset's always been doing the car business different. And I feel like right now with where the market's at and where the industry is and where people are, the opportunity is social media. And it's pushing the envelope and doing things that maybe I'm not so comfortable with and trying different aspects to find the new talent, the new customer, how quick they want to have data and access. And for us, there are market regulations of things we can't share, things that we are limited to give access to. So social media is a way for us to kind of work around that. So it's been a really cool experiment. We're learning. And again, the part that's fun about it is the connections we're making just like this.
Yeah, Jessica, you shared with me prior to this podcast survey that Edmunds conducted, which we'll dig into at the end of the podcast. But what I thought was interesting in the survey, I'll give a little teaser here, is just the amount that social media influences purchasing decisions nowadays when it comes to, people buying cars. And it's pretty remarkable, how people, they use many different, just of course, automotive listing sites, comparison websites, but social media has really crept up. So I think you're making a smart move. I would tell you that my prediction is that, first of all, I think that the podcasting game, not to get too niche here into the media space, but I think this is very relevant. But I think that the podcast arena in general, the whole podcast game is going to continue to fill up with more niche type of shows and content for specific markets, very specific audiences. And I think that you're actually very early in the dealership space. I think that we're going to see a trend over the next couple of years of a lot more dealers doing what you're doing. And I think from my perspective, right, knowing nothing about your goals of your podcast, and which I want you to tell us about next, but I think that it is going to be a really great way for dealerships within their communities to talk about what they do or bring transparency to the actual experience at their dealership and get the audience, get the the potential customers, the community comfortable with that dealership. Someone told me a line recently that I loved, which is, what's a podcast? It's trust at scale, right? You get to eavesdrop on a conversation, just like we're about to do right now, of three people at a coffee shop, which we're not, but let's pretend we are, and it's pretty remarkable. It's it really you're able to build that connection and get inside someone's head. So before we move on, with that said, I do want to know, what is your goal with the podcast? Like, why are you even doing this?
Yeah, so we started down the path of a learning management system. Really was the beginning point of how do we get all of the employees to see the similar messaging. Our auto group is 22 locations, so across 3 different states. So how can we share that information? How can we make sure that we're educating, onboarding? So we started down the LMS side, and then it opened the windows to social media and connections, and we jumped on the early adapter side of Techion and the DMS, and it's been just kind of a unique opportunity for us to look at a way to do the automotive business differently. Again, I've came straight to this Toyota store 10 years ago, right out of college grad, looking for something. And the idea of being a different dealership that wasn't going to do business traditionally is what excited me. And that's where I think the goal is for us is really try to focus on our mission statement, which is driving relationships through awesome experiences. And we think that having the opportunity to bring in people, like said, from Techion, through Car Dealership Guy, through Edmunds, the networks of people we'll meet to be able to share with our customers, consumers, or even staff, and let them know what the transparency looks like of what we're doing and why we're making the decisions we are making. So it's been great so far. We're running through the test episodes, pilots, and it's amazing already to see the number of guests that have lined up to raise their hand and ask to be on it, and we haven't done any advertising behind it yet. So it's almost become addicting too since.
I know. I hear that. So I'm looking forward to seeing your progress, and it's exciting move. So congrats on that, and I'm sure you're going to kill it. All right, no shortage of content to cover today, from pricing, affordability. I've had my fair share of internet highlighting all these tariffs and whatnot. So I've done a little bit of that, but we're gonna touch on that. Zach, we're gonna get a little bit into what it's like operating in your store nowadays, how you're managing through all the topics I just mentioned, plus pricing, retaining the demand. Of course, you're a Toyota store, so you have it pretty good in this current market. But we want to hear, the good and the bad. Before we get into that, Jessica, I want to turn it over to you. If you can kick us off with a market update of what is happening right now in our market.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the key to everything right now, what we're seeing out there is really just affordability. We're seeing incentives creep back on the new vehicle side. That has been, a desert through the microchip shortage, but that is coming back more and more. I mean, it is spotty. It's not across the brand. Zach, you're probably not running, blockbuster deals over at your shop, but, some of your colleagues may. And we are starting to see prices, maybe go down a little bit in aggregate on the new vehicle side, as incentives creep up. Days to turn, though, how long they're sitting on dealership lots, that is getting longer. So that means consumers are still struggling to grapple with not only the prices, but the interest rates and all the monthly payment, everything that goes along with that. And, what we are seeing is that because of the incentives coming back, we are seeing downward pressure on used vehicle prices as used vehicle prices are starting to drop, but days to turn, is actually shorter. So that means, we're seeing increased demand on the used vehicle side as people just struggle with the affordability question, just trying to get a vehicle that fits in their monthly budget. Because although we all love the shiny new cars, the reality is, especially in this world of interest rates, it's hard to afford them. So, any dealer out there that is running specials on APR, I think that's going to hit a good audience, because I think consumers they want to hear those messages right now. Because I feel like at some point in the auto market, 0% for 60 was just falling on deaf ears. It was so abundant. People didn't care. Credit was cheap. But now all of a sudden it's a different ball game. And I think that, you start running this type of information out there, you'll probably get a much better result than you had in the past.
Jessica, it's funny you say that, because you're right that I've been posting on my consumer heavy channels some 0% deals. I used to post like a bunch of different things, like discounts, like all these different formats, but I've stuck to 0% deals because, to your point, it's really been resonating more than, you can frame a discount in many different ways. We all know that, but 0% specifically has been resonating. And to your point, it's like it almost feels novel again from the consumers when I'm posting that. And Zach, I see you smiling. Have you experienced something similar?
Yeah, I mean, just the rarity of 0%. When I started in the business, everything was 0% for 72 or 0.9 for 72. And you would even see some of the struggling franchises that would throw out zero for 81 months and even flirt with 84. And now to hear zero for 60, it's like the mad dash at, Black Friday at the Walmart to get your kid's toy. And it is kind of that unicorn now in the industry.
Yeah, it's been resonating really well. I'm curious to know, Jessica, that said, what are you seeing? What are consumers buying right now? What are they not buying? What are you seeing? Where are the big trends?
Mm. Well, I mean, I think that it's going to look different by brand, obviously. And what they are looking for is, if you still look at, people are thinking, oh, SUVs are too expensive, but, SUV market share still goes up because it goes everything from, something that's subcompact all the way up to an Escalade. So SUV is just such a wide category nowadays. And people think, oh, if prices the way they are, people aren't buying those. No, they still are. But maybe not as big as expensive. Because I think, what we saw when interest rates were lower, and especially when the pandemic started as well, and we saw like 0% for like 84 months, people just bought big vehicles and they bought all the bells and whistles and they were finally able to get what they want. And we're seeing a bit of a reversal of that now. And even if you look at pickup truck market share in the first quarter, it's down. It's starting to look a bit like it did in the recession, where there was that move towards cheaper vehicles, even though it's not what we want. We want something that is big and heavily contented. But the reality is that's what people are buying. So if you kind of see the way the market share is looking, it is a little reminiscent of what we saw back in 2008, 2009, which was also, I think, met with a gas price spike, which we saw in 2008. So that also kind of put more pressure on pickup trucks. But now I think we're seeing the whole interest rate market put pressure on that. So I'd say what people are buying may not be exactly what they want. And I think that's an interesting dynamic if we think about what the market will look like in a few years. Because we did see post-recession purchase regret and people just trading in vehicles because it was like, this is not working for me. I don't know why I bought this because I could afford it, but it's not really what I wanted necessarily.
Interesting. And how do you measure that? Like, I didn't know about that, but how do you know that, like, post-recession, when you say purchase regret, like, how did that actually get quantified or manifest in some data or statistics?
Yeah. I mean, you'll look at how quickly the vehicle's traded in and then also what is traded. Like if you see somebody trading in like for instance, like a Honda Fit, and then they went and they bought, a Ford Explorer. It was like, and then they only owned the Honda Fit, you could see for, a year or two. So I think it kind of gives the hint to like, they bought that because they saw gas prices were north of $4, which maybe doesn't seem that bad now, but back then it did. And, it wasn't the vehicle for them. And that, it's, you kind of can see it through those ways.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds kind of like me. We had a SUV, then the third kid came and we're like, we're out. We're going to the minivan. So we made a switch.
Yeah. And I think those are I think that's a different buyer. It's like, there's the people that have to make those decisions. And I feel like that is so classic of like, now we actually need a third row. So we have to buy it. It doesn't actually matter what's happening in the market because, the kid is coming, whether we have the right car or not. So it's got to happen.
Yeah, we ordered it from pretty far away. So Zach, talk to us a little bit about parlaying what Jessica just said to like in store to the micro. I love the juicy in store anecdotes and data. What are you seeing in store from buying trends and pricing trends?
For sure, what Jessica just shared is so real and so it's so difficult for us to manage in a day. I mean, we're coming out of 3 years of lease rates and terms that were phenomenal that anyone could buy at below market value because it was just that opportunity why no one was buying cars in the world. Nobody knew how to make a decision what was going to be next. So the cars were essentially being given away. And us as dealers all felt like we were the Greek gods of car sales because anything on our lot we could sell because it was so easy. And now they're returning with a 3-year lease that's ended and their payments are going up $200 to $300. And that culture shock moment's there. And you do have the other dealers on the other side that 2 years ago selected what was only left on the inventory. And I came in for a Highlander and I had to select a Corolla because I only had that choice available and I just got in a total loss accident and I need a car now. So it's such a resonating statement to say that consumers are coming in today, maybe even unaware of what the availability is in the marketplace, but also some of them are behind the eight ball because of the decision they were forced to make 2 years, 3 years ago. It's been a very unique scenario for my staff to hire in during this time period and have to learn not necessarily how to sell a car, but how to emotionally handle a conversation around payment shock and what a difference it's been from 3 years ago where it was, this is your car, you're buying it because it's the only one in the lot. And if you don't want it, there's 3 people in the showroom that are going to take it, to, I'm so sorry that this is the situation you're in. Let us work with you the best we can to figure out how we can manage your budget. So very different dynamic in the last, 24 months, 36 months.
Oh, I mean, the number of people that I've spoken to that are like, I'm returning my lease. I just want the same thing again. And they're like, and now it is $300 more. And they've come to me like, is this right? Like, is someone trying to take advantage of me? They think there's some sort of conspiracy out there. And like, I get it because it doesn't, it's like, this is the same vehicle. It is just 3 years later. And if you are a serial leaser, like you kind of know how the system has worked for, X amount of times. And I think that's shock. And I think managing that customer emotion, I bet that's tricky.
Yeah, my brother's in that scenario. He's a downtown Chicago resident, leases a vehicle, and he's had it for 3 years. He's extended the 2 additional 6-month periods that Toyota allows. And at Mother's Day, he said, hey, in 2 months, I got to come buy a car from you. And I was like, man, you are in so much trouble, because being a downtown Chicago resident, I'm sure he's got dents. I'm sure he's got dings. And then he said he only had 9,000 miles on a almost 4-year lease now that should have equity in it, and it probably will have some, but as far as what he's done in this, his payments are not going to be anywhere relative to where he thinks he's walking into it. So just kind of that shock factor that I'm sure, once again, our little brother will have to have that conversation.
Zach, I'm curious, how are you handling that? Meaning, are you offering, a cheaper vehicle? Are you offering, a cheaper financial instrument? I mean, like financing versus leasing as an example, all of the above. I mean, what's the outlet here? Like if I'm following trends, what's rising?
Leasing for us in the Toyota world is not rising. It is completely diminished to almost zero. I mean, we were about a 35% capture, 40% capture rate on lease before all this shift. And I think we're down to like the 12, 11%. And those are the only people that are looking for the tax incentives of leasing and depreciation. I mean, a normal consumer can't justify the lease payment. And I understand that from Toyota sense as well. Of what's the interest rate for just doing market business, and to get a competitive lease rate, it's not really that competitive anymore with what the standard rate from whoever, Toyota Financial through JP Morgan Chase, whoever it may be, as cost of doing business. So we've seen, believe it or not, this is a part of the car business that sometimes is hard to understand. We've seen just the rise in actual payment acceptance, where 350, 400, maybe 500 was okay, to now 6, 7, 800. And that's been a shift in us for training and development to get our sales staff around being comfortable presenting a $700 car payment for 60 months on a $30,000 asset because of interest rates. So it's definitely hurt market total sales volume. But then we've also seen that kind of translate into the service side of, consumers keeping vehicles longer historically than ever. And obviously the increase we've seen in fixed operations.
Zach, talk to us about what vehicles you are discounting, right? We know that this Toyota specifically on the new side, I mean, phenomenal demand, lowest market day supply in the market today. What are you discounting across your inventory today, and how is that playing out for you?
Yeah, for sure. So Toyota, as far as what we see here right now, is your internal combustion engines, your ICE engines, those are still showing discounts pretty much across all makes and models. There's a few that are being released, as such as the Grand Highlander, that you're still seeing some that aren't having the significant amount of discounting. But because Toyota has incentivized so much of the market day supply push, it's really about how quick we're getting rid of this inventory and what's available on lot to sold timeframes. So the main focal point for us is kind of working a matrix or an algorithm that works off VDPs, the back end, as far as us looking at.
Can you explain that to us, by the way? Can you just define that, EDPs, and what that means?
Yep. So we're talking like vehicle display pages where someone goes in, they're actually searching a specific vehicle into a specific inventory piece on your lot. So not just going to Edmunds and looking through all the vehicles and just scrolling up and down, but selecting a specific model getting that data analytics on our side showing somebody's actually searched that vehicle, opened it, displayed. And then for us, we're looking at how quick that vehicle is being marketed. So if we can get that thing online within 24 hours, what's the VDP rate? And we're checking that weekly, monthly, hourly, so that we can truly use data analytics to justify our price points. We're not by any means using book values on new cars. We're not by any means using our gut feeling on what cars should be discounted. This is all live data market across the board to try to have a competitive advantage, because we still feel like the marketplace isn't necessarily all there in automotive industry.
What do you mean by that? The marketplace is not all there.
I just still feel like the dealership world as a whole is still going with their gut feeling, and these cars don't sell well for us. Instead of looking at what does consumer reporting show, what is in your primary marketing area, who's driving what size vehicle are they driving, what are they buying, what colors. Instead of just saying we need another Camry on our lot, what color Camry do we need, what trim model, what accessory packages do we need, and then with that, which accessory packages do they buy at a higher price point than what they buy at a lower price point. So trying to use true data versus 40 years of experience and saying this is what we sell in this market, and allowing actual facts to tell us what actually sells.
Mm-hmm. And how's that been for you with your team? Like, how have you really adopted that mindset? I'd have to imagine not everyone, or you've hired some people that have maybe been in the business before. That's pretty, to your point, there's a lot of gut. And I would say there's a lot of people making decisions off gut, which look, gut is important. There's a reason, we have these instincts. It's great when you combine it with data. How have you actually implemented this stuff? Like what you're saying sounds, really great. How are you really doing this in practice and making it work better?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, how's it gone over? You ever drive on a road where you don't know there's a road bump or a speed bump coming and you hit it going a little too fast? That's how it's basically gone over in the dealership. But it's about how many times we consistently go back and show the facts and show the information that we can find. And then how does that affect individuals, production? How does that as a sales metric? How do we sell more cars faster? How do we make the job easier? How do we have more customers scheduled to come in? So we're using that all through the data analytics. So a lot of things like Vista Dash has been a huge partner of ours to draw more information faster. Obviously, Google Analytics and the G4 stuff that we've seen come out has helped us as well. But then our partnership with Techion has been a big one through DMS data, trying to find a one silo platform to where we can actually evaluate that data. Edmunds, what we love with them is that they're showing market data back to what's our most predominant source, which is dealership website. So any way that we can actually use a dealership website, not as a landing page, but as an actual tool and play offense versus just the defense of showing your information, like what time do you open, what time do you close. That's kind of what we've loved in finding partners out there that can, marry with us to find the ways to do business better, not just get another customer to our store.
And I want to dig in one more point that you mentioned before this last question I asked you, which is Toyota's incentives. You said that Toyota's incentivizing you for day supply. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What are the incentives behind the scenes that Toyota is trying to drive through their dealerships?
Yeah, so really the incentives is just vehicle allocation. It's not discounts, it's not pricing, it's not anything. Right now, the name of the game with Toyota's market growth and them grabbing a larger market share than ever before is truly about getting more allocation and inventory to your lot. So the faster you turn, the more vehicles they allocate directly to you out of your district, out of your region. Where I'm located is the Chicago region. So how it breaks down is, let's say there's 3,500 vehicles coming to this region this month. Depending on your success, it's going to be depending on what you receive in inventory. So the difference between receiving 35 vehicles on an allocation versus receiving 43 is truly, as minuscule as 8 cars sounds, is truly a difference between me being able to serve 8 customers this month and me being able to serve 8 customers in another 45, 60, 90 days. So it adds up very quickly in the incentives of how fast can we get rid of these cars, which has also led to the success Toyota has seen in market share.
Yeah, Jessica, we were chatting, I think 1 or 2 episodes ago about Toyota actually losing market share, heavily driven by the fact that they haven't had enough supply over the last couple of years. So interesting just to hear you talk about this, Zach. I do want to turn it back to you, Jessica. Edmunds recently put out a new analysis about car shoppers coming back into the market. Can you explain this to us a little bit about this analysis? Why specifically now? Is this price driven, or what's happening in the marketplace that is leading car buyers to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, so we're always looking to see like what's new out there because it feels like a lot of times in the marketplace things don't necessarily change that much. The past few years, I'd say, are an exception. But the one thing we did notice this year in the first quarter was that the average age of trade-ins was going up, and it is both for people trading in for new vehicles and also people trading in for used vehicles. And what it really looks like is that we've been talking about this pent-up demand. People were sitting out the past few years, kind of waiting for the market to normalize a bit. Well, they probably have gotten to a point where they just can't wait any longer. Zach had just mentioned about people going and getting their vehicle serviced, getting their vehicle repaired because they've been holding on to it for a long time. And it feels like those folks are now coming back more into, to dealerships to buy vehicles. So that is a shift. And you're going to see people coming in with older vehicles, which I think helps the fact that we could have some used inventory that is older, because we do know that, maybe not super, super old inventory, but older inventory means that it's cheaper. They usually sell quicker because there's so much demand, especially in this age of high prices, high interest rates. That definitely will be a change. But also these people are kind of coming into a market that they haven't been into for a while. So I think that goes to the emotional coaching that Zach was saying, because they're going to probably have a bit of a shock. I mean, the fact that they have sat out knows that they are probably cognizant of what's been going on, in the marketplace in terms of inventory shortages and interest rates. But I still think that they sat in the F&I office at the end of the day, they're going to be, if you haven't bought a car in 7-9 years, you're walking into a bit of a different game. So I think that's something that dealers can prepare for, is these customers coming back that have been out for a while.
Zach, are you seeing that on your end with people coming back into the market and, any specific trends there?
Yeah, when Jessica shared it, I had to laugh to myself because we were just looking at a stat that shows that we've sold as many sub $20,000 cars this year as we did in 2023 already. So to the point that consumers are keeping them longer, it also offsets the side of that new car market still not being 100% there where they can afford or the shock, to making that same agreement to go maybe to a lesser vehicle that's better than what they have, but maybe not exactly what they want. So it's been a definitely interesting shift in the marketplace for us.
Yeah, I just had another used car dealer on the podcast, and he was talking about just the rise of their value lot, right? So the value lot, the classic, like let's put all the the hoopties in another lot and retail them instead of wholesaling them, because there is a market for there, but let's not take brand or reputational risk and have a different set of guidelines. But long story short, he was telling me on the pod, his name is Michael, he's saying, we can't hold on to these cars. And we put some recon into them. We make them as normal as possible. But he said we can't hold on to them. Plus the buyer does their own title and tag. I mean, it's pretty remarkable how it adds up. Everything you're saying, it makes total sense given the market and where it's at.
Yeah, I think the sub $10,000 car that we all used to look for that was still a good car now is a sub $15,000 to $20,000 car. And I think the people that are financially strapped to where they only have $5,000-$6,000 aren't finding those cars on Facebook Marketplace or the side of the road. So they are forced to come to maybe some of these franchise dealers they've never thought to explore and look at, which is great for the automotive industry, for somebody like myself that's trying to change people's expectations, because it's bringing in a different clientele that, maybe today they need something like this, that in 3, 4, 5 years, they may need something nicer in return. So it's a great way for us as a dealership to grow market share as well.
We finally did it. Car Dealership Guy News is live and ready to serve the car industry. We're not a traditional news outlet, and I'm not a journalist, but I believe the market deserves concise and unbiased car industry news presented in clear, straightforward English. From the latest stories in automotive to CDG podcast summaries, dealership best practices, and even consumer deals, we're going to offer it all. And the best part? In the classic CDG spirit, everything's 100% free for you. Check it out at cdg.news. That's cdg.news, and please give us feedback. Tell us what else you want. Rip us apart. We're not scared. We just want to provide value. Again, visit cdg.news or click the link in the show notes below. Transitioning to hybrids. Hybrids they're getting all the attention. So hybrid market share is eclipsed full BEV, like battery electric vehicle market share, right? So hybrids, we've known, have been the talk of the town, but market share has been rising. Zach, you're at Toyota, or Exhibit A of this. Jessica, what's happening? Where are we headed to next year? Give us the lay of the land on the hybrid situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think hybrid right now in terms of market share, it's really an availability issue because where it is right now, it's slightly lower than it was last year, but I think it's the demand is high and they're just not the vehicles to support continued growth in market share. But I think that is a separate issue. But I think as people look towards the electrified future, they see hybrids is sort of maybe more of their comfort zone of where they are right now. They're not ready to figure out battery charging. My God, I just saw like a long thread about people in my neighborhood trying to figure out how to get a charger and their voltage wasn't right. And it was like, I could just see people being turned off by the idea as the thread went on. But hybrid, you don't really have to change your relationship with your vehicle. So I think that when folks are kind of doing the research, they're like, well, maybe a hybrid is right for me this year. Maybe in 5 years time, things will look different. So, that excitement that we saw with EVs, is a bit tempered. And even if you looked at where EVs were selling and what hybrids were selling a few years ago, they're at parity and EVs were just going to shoot up right past them. And, that hasn't happened. Now hybrids are outselling them. And it's, and I think it's just it's a real practicality. It's so excited to be hyped about the newest, latest, greatest thing, but it may not be the best solution for everyone, especially, geographically where you are. Big difference between living in San Francisco and West Texas. It's not for everyone, especially when you look at just the, geography across the United States.
Zach, are you seeing this similarly in store? Look, we know that Toyota's hybrid sales are on fire, but what is the conversation like, right? Is it people coming in for the hybrid, or is it more of like, these are my options, so I'm going to take a hybrid? What are you really seeing on the ground level?
Yeah, I think what Jessica said, I think the comfortability of electric vehicle intrigues a lot of people, but also terrifies them. So the hybrid market has become truly a wildfire for us that, Toyota went all in on hybrid and then took so much criticism a year and a half ago about, being left behind and falling back to kind of what Toyota's been known for as the last one to the show with technology and the new nuances of the automotive industry. And now today they're looking again like the forerunner of front of the game, front of the pack in that hybrid market that continued to grow while everybody else went full electric, while other manufacturers forced people to put massive investments into electric vehicles are now walking that all back to the hybrid market. So truly we've seen that part be untouchable where, as we talked earlier, just a hybrid vehicle in allocation is pre-sold before it arrives. And if we have one that becomes available, it's gone over the weekend. It doesn't make it 3, 4, 5 days in inventory because the line of people that are still willing to accept something like this are triple the ones that are still looking at internal combustion engines.
What about consumer expectations? Like, are consumers demanding the hybrids? Are they willing to pay more for the hybrids? What are you seeing there?
I mean, this would be an intriguing one for me to learn from Jessica too. From what we're seeing in the micro kind of side of things is we don't really see a consumer really hesitating too much with the idea of going with hybrid over an internal combustion with the price difference. I think in their mind, they see 40 miles per gallon versus 30 miles per gallon, and that's justifiable enough, even though maybe the math doesn't make it as clear. But I think it's just the acceptance of I'm getting more and this is better. And I think that because the EV marketing has been so hard, so well pushed, so aggressive, that they're not for sure if they can make that shift. So the hybrid's just the easiest next move for them.
I was talking to a reporter from a large California newspaper, and they were saying that they are convinced that a lot of consumers buy hybrids so they look like they're making the effort to go green, not necessarily committing to a full battery electric. But it's like, look at me, I'm trying. I'm going to go hybrid, not just go internal combustion engine. So there could be, a little bit of that sentiment. But I do think that the math is really interesting, especially if you're buying a hybrid at MSRP or even a little above MSRP, if you actually are getting that return on investment for the payback, because the case is hard. I mean, fuel economy, especially for, Toyota is good across the board. It's not like we're getting, 10, 15 miles a gallon these days. Even internal combustion engines are fairly compelling. So that delta between that and the hybrid sometimes takes a long time to actually pay back in reality. But I think it is overlooked in many cases because they feel like this is the better way to go. And this is sort of like more of the future, and you're buying a new car anyways. So you might as well like kind of get ahead of it. And that's what I think they're deciding to do. Even though they probably are or, in some cases even waiting. I just imagine that the truck pulls up with the hybrids at Zach's shop and there's like fanfare happens. People are so excited that they finally have arrived.
All right, so we're talking about value. So I want to pose a question to both of you, and I'm curious to hear what you're going to say here. What about used EVs, like full electric vehicles, but used ones, right? Because those have been pretty good value in the market in terms of price point, the used EV tax credit, and just the way prices came down, really driven by new car prices that came down so significantly. So that's to both of you, right? How do you think about the value in the used EV space? And also, Zach, for you, how are you capitalizing on that?
What I would look at if I was a consumer or trying to make the best decision is not only used EVs, but what is the difference between used EVs and then EV leases? Because we know that those are pretty cheap as well. I mean, the EV lease rate last month in April was 68%. So 68% of all EVs sold in the US were leased. They know that there's good deals there. So I think that would really be the trade-off to see exactly what would those price points be, how would they differ if the EV is a used EV is a good deal, because there are great deals to be had out there on the used side, but they're also
and Jessica, that 68% number is on new EVs, right?
Correct. New EVs.
And then Zach, on your end, are you capitalizing on this? I mean, are you scared to touch used EVs because of the price, the random kind of price drops that have happened, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, exactly. So we've stayed away from them. I mean, they're just untouchable for us as far as pre-owned vehicles go. And even if that's a trade-in value, we'll be pretty blunt with individuals and saying, hey, this may be a perfect CarMax, Carvana car.
Wait, so you've stayed from used EVs completely?
Completely. Yep. So our battle with this has just been the market shifts we've seen. And I shared with them that there's a dealer I know that had 13-ish Teslas in inventory. And when Tesla reduced the price on all of their electric vehicles, that just deplenished their actual value and asset, and the profit just completely went away. And now this dealer sat with 13 vehicles in an investment standpoint that they can't make up the difference of what just happened. So between the tax incentives, between even people writing off as far as business expenses on some of these leases because they qualify for Section 179 as weight goes, we've seen just this market volatility that we can't feel confident running the data through and making sure that if we put this investment together, we can exit this in 15 days and still be profitable, because the market is shifting that fast with electrified vehicles.
That's fascinating. I think this is such an opportunity for our industry. I mean, there should be, in theory, right, there should be no dealership that stays away from any type of vehicle at some price. And so it just makes me wonder, like, how does that solved? And I'm sure someone listening to this has a great idea. I've put out some ideas out there, but needless to say, I mean, it's definitely because of the volatility we've had in the last couple of years. You're not alone in that field by any means. Frankly, like, I've had lots of conversations about this with people about, simply not touching cars. Another one, which, a bit of a higher price point than the average EV, I would say, but like Ford Lightnings, I know some, certain dealers that are just, I won't trade in a Ford Lightning, which I also found, I can't say it's shocking to me, but it does make you wonder, like, how what's the end game here? How's that solved? So, but I do want to flip that on its head for a second. I want to ask you about ICE, internal combustion. I mean, at this point, do you have anyone coming in strictly looking for internal combustion, or like, get me away from all this like hybrid stuff? Like, do you see that as a market that's just going to, wither away and it's going to be almost inexistent, at least within your brands or the mainstream brands? How do you see that today?
Yeah, I think there's probably 10 to 15% of consumers that are still, steadfast on the internal combustion engine. I think the majority have made the shift, or at least the mindset of being open to explore it. There's still the 10 to 15% that are performance, the V8s, the trucks, the SUVs, not enough towing capacity, torque, etc., which is unique to see that some of that in the hybrid side on the SUVs and pickup trucks have come from a performance increase, not necessarily a fuel economy increase. So it's going to definitely always be there. 10 to 15%, I think, of what we're seeing in the day-to-day will refuse to have any conversation. I think the success that the Toyota Prius has had for as many years as it has with reliability and being ranked as the number one vehicle for 12 years in reliability. I know Edmunds just ranked it as a top car in the previous year. So for us to see that kind of be there and steadfast for so many years is allowing us to have kind of that confidence in education, but there's still going to be 10 to 15% that just refuses the idea of new technology. And I think that's in any industry, not just automotive and internal combustion engines.
Can you give us an overview right now on what is happening with interest rates, monthly payments, really the health of the consumer? Can you run us down through the current state?
Yeah, I mean, we keep thinking that maybe, interest rates will hopefully start to go down at some point in time. And I think that there has been influence from subsidized interest rates on the new vehicle side. So I think that that definitely helps. But when we look across the board on aggregate, interest rates for new vehicles are still over 7% on average. For used vehicles, they're over 11%. And that translates into a monthly payment that's, like around $550. And if you actually look at that, plus the term and the interest rate, someone that is buying a used vehicle on average is paying $10,000, in interest, alone. So it is definitely a shift from where this industry was, a few years ago, where it was like, low APRs are really what's helping sell people into bigger vehicles, more content, all of those things. And now I imagine it's just the opposite. People are having to go for the $15,000-$20,000 used vehicle, because that's where, that's the only monthly payment that they can afford. So I mean, the credit market is still pretty, pretty tough for the average consumer. So, again, I think that conversation we had about the relevancy and interest that people will have with low, APR and interest rate communications is definitely going to be valid as we move to the summer and you have model year sell downs and summer sales events and all those type of things.
What are you seeing as the most common ways right now how are people lowering their payments? Like what's the most common way you're seeing in the market today?
Well, I think you have people that are, their income is higher and they can stomach a shorter loan term. And so you will see that a little bit of people just taking a 3-year loan term rather than someone that would have traditionally at least gone 5 years. But again, I think your income level has to be quite high, especially with these car prices to do that. And on the used vehicle side, what we do see is people are having to buy, they're just going for more miles, older vehicles. So, again, those older trade-ins that come are probably good for those type of consumers because they were maybe a 3-year-old or a CPO type of a customer before. Now they're having to go 5-7 years just to get something within their budget.
Zach, talk to us a little bit about in-store operations. I think, Jessica, we're getting pretty close to the consumer survey, and I want to pass the baton to you. I think it's some really good insight there. Zach, you mentioned earlier about leasing penetration being extremely low with Toyota specifically. Definitely not I wouldn't call that an industry trend, but Toyota is an anomaly in that sense. First of all, open question, right? Like biggest challenges you're experiencing in-store right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we're experiencing right now is the interest rates flat out. I mean, I think it's changed consumers' expectations. It's changed the way that we do financing. It's changed the way that we look at the position of a finance manager. Truly looked at the way how a salesperson sells a vehicle, because if we haven't addressed that culture shock of, you are going to pay $10,000 in interest, you are going to have these different aspects as far as, your total payments at the end of the loan itself. Consumers are looking at buying a car so much different than how they have historically since I've been in this industry, and especially this specific store. So I think that everyone's learning how to live and function differently in a world where, the 0%, like we talked about in the very beginning, are the anomaly, and that, when they are there, they're making consumer decisions where maybe someone leaves the Toyota brand for 0%. Even though I've bought 4 to 5, 6 Toyotas my whole life and my parents said always buy them, I now can't afford to stay in that. So it's a shift that we're going to have to learn how to be ahead of the curve versus reactive.
Yeah, definitely impacting brand loyalty. And then talk to me about your interest rates, right? Let's turn the tables on you. Like, talk to me about floor plan. What are you paying on floor plans? How much are your floor plan credits offsetting that? Of course, for anyone listening, floor plan credits are provided by the auto manufacturer to the dealer, and they credit their floor plan expense. So just give us a little of the, transparent details into what that world looks like.
Yeah, as far as transparency goes with it, right, that's the real reason, number one reason why we're being so aggressive to move inventory as fast as possible is historically we've had one of the greatest floor plan rates in the low, single digits across the board that we could see. And we've fallen in love with it. And it was never a big deal to have a car in inventory because it was costing you pennies on the dollar for the opportunity you have. And now with an interest rate that's jumped in the 5, 6, 7% depending on where market is, it's become an incentive and imperative to get rid of the vehicle. So maybe the sales staff doesn't understand that to a full transparency standpoint. But as far as my management team and operation team, it's truly the difference between running a profit today versus running a profit in 30 days. Even though you sell that car in 30 days and make a profit on the car, you may not see a net dealer profit due to what you pay in floor plans due to the credit being absorbed versus obviously being something that you can offset in the ownership experience. So it's definitely a game that we're playing. By all means, Toyota's market has not given us that opportunity to have more inventory. So it's kind of that double-edged sword where we want to have the opportunity to sell more cars to consumers, but also can we afford to have all these cars on the lot? I know there's some domestic stores that have 100 plus on the ground. And I just think as I go by their lots, how are you making it with what you have there, which is where I think you see on some of the wholesale sites, new cars being listed immediately day one for wholesale with 3 miles on them, 7 miles, 10 miles, because some of these dealers can't withstand their floor plan and how it is setting up as far as lending goes. So definitely a very new dynamic to have new cars that are being wholesaled.
Definitely. Zach, on that topic, what is your inventory strategy? Like if you could summarize it into like 30 seconds, how are you managing your inventory? I'm specifically referring to, do you work on specific turn times, meaning like price cuts at certain points? Are you, how often are you changing those prices? And then third, how are you marketing it?
Yeah, so used car side, it's daily. The turn on the used car side for us is sub 45 days. Once the car gets to 50 days, it's full. Dump the vehicle. Doesn't matter how good you bought it. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Doesn't matter how unique. It's got to go because of market volatility. New car side for us, it's back to that analytics game for us about at what price point does this car sell? How quick do we need to move? How many are available? It's the same thing that I think dealers have done for years on the used car market, but never really looked at it as far as new car because the supply was always there. We're always going to get more. So for us, it's trying to, again, be ahead of that curve where most dealers still are not necessarily there. It's always amazing to me to look at, when we have the opportunity to dealer locate or dealer trade with another dealer for a specific vehicle. And I do still find new Toyotas that are 75 days in inventory and it's still at MSRP. And the dealer's response is, we can't get this vehicle. And my response is, well, you're not going to get another one because you haven't sold that one either. Back to that day supply strategy that Toyota corporate's sharing with, the franchise model. So for us, it's really using things again like Edmunds tool and Edmunds Premier to be able to find opportunities to identify where customers are searching. Where are they at in the market and how can we get there? And that's where we've used social media to try to push for our store that one-on-one connection with a consumer to kind of open it. And TikTok lives have been absolutely jaw-dropping that every time we do one, we learn something else and sell a car on a TikTok live, which who in the world thought we would be doing that?
Yeah, so
sure.
Explain for anyone that doesn't know, what is a TikTok live? What are you doing on these videos? Like, give us the whole scoop.
Yeah, so for us, TikTok live, truly, we got on it just to be brand recognition. Again, when I'm walking through the showroom and I would say 70% of my staff is at some point in the day scrolling through social media, TikTok, I've realized that we need to be doing something, even if it's just who we are. And we got onto the TikTok game, making the funny parodies, the office style videos. What's it like to be inside a dealership? I think anyone who's worked in dealership has always thought, if only there was a camera in here, it could be a real life sitcom or real life series. So for us, it was that opportunity to share.
True.
The TikTok lives for us is truly just going directly simulcast, essentially turning on the webcam on your phone and being able to talk with whoever wants to view. And it is game changing, jaw dropping how many human beings are willing to turn their phone on and just watch somebody walk down inventory and say, here's what we have in inventory. And a 30-minute TikTok live, we could have 50 to 150,000 viewers. We just had an interview with a 16-year-old that was looking to start his career as an apprentice technician that came from TikTok live because my service director, his best friend, commented and said, I hate the fact that your dealership is on my TikTok live. My service director gets a phone call from him, runs down to the guy doing TikTok live, gets on there, introduces himself, and yesterday had a 16-year-old interview about a kid that wants to have a career in auto mechanics. Like, that's gold for us in the auto industry to find someone that young raising their hand saying, I want to be a part of this. That's that connection that we have as far as selling vehicles, as far as market updates, as far as being directly in a consumer's hand at the time they're making a buying decision. So that's where we've tried to use this social media platform that we're trying to learn how to establish is kind of that secret sauce, if you would.
You guys are doing great work. So I'm sure someone listening to this, there has to be some people that are they're gonna give this a shot, because this is it's really incredible how you're showcasing, again, it's the strategy, right? You're documenting and showcasing who you are, builds trust with the audience, bringing demand. Fascinating, great work. All right, Jessica, let's dive into the survey from Edmunds. You worked on a survey about consumer sentiment, shopping behavior, some great insight in there. And so I'll turn the baton over to you and let you take us through this.
Yeah, I would love to get a lot of your reactions onto these questions too, Yossi, obviously.
I'm ready.
We did a survey. We do lots of surveys, but this one is kind of just about the shopping process, is particularly how it relates to the online world, because obviously that's of interest to us. And since we just talked about the success that Zach has found on TikTok, one of the interesting things that I saw in the survey is we asked these folks, like, in terms of like the sites out there, what has the strongest impact of your purchase decision? So these are people that are in market, they're planning to buy within the next 6 months, or they just bought in the past 3 months. So very fresh, very recent customers across the United States. So we listed all the websites out there. Luckily for us, there's some sane people, and they cited car shopping websites like Edmunds as the top. So thank God for that. We can keep our lights on. But the ones I would love to get more of your take on is YouTube, which 16% of people said that has had a big impact on their purchase decision, as well as social media, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, 14%. So 14% of people out there are saying, this has the biggest impact on my purchase decision, what I'm seeing. Like, do you think that is surprising, or do you think that that kind of goes in line of what we've been talking about here with these TikTok lives?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that comes to mind is it reminds me of the whole digital retailing thing of like 100% of people buy their car online. It just the question is, how much online do they really do? Do they just find the car and come into the store, right? So it to me feels sort of similar. Like, to your point, Zach said something fascinating about what he noticed in store. And I'm a huge believer in this. I call this like, I'm going to make something right now, but I call it like the going with the grain philosophy, which is that you see your employees in store on social media, right? One thing you could do, one side is you could be like, stop doing that, like go call your lead or whatever. And you could do something like that. But another thing you could do is you could go with the grain, right? And be like, oh, you're obsessed with social media or TikTok. You love this platform. Amazing. How about we create some content for the dealership? So all that said, I think that, Jessica, to the 16% point you made, I think it's probably higher in reality, like, or people that are exposed to, but it does feel to me, it feels like it makes a lot of sense, because when you think about nowadays, how different generations consume content, get their news, social media increasingly is sucking up our time, and it's just gotten a lot harder to get people off platform to do anything, especially when it comes to consuming content. Forget like engaging with a site like, Edmunds and going through, seeing cars and stuff like that. That's a more rich experience, right? But simply consuming content, it's just gotten a lot harder to get people off platform. And so I always say, like, everything on the internet, I mean, not even on the internet, I mean, everything, every form of entertainment, or you could be watching Netflix on a TV, but you're competing with social media, which is like the de facto destination for consuming content. So I'm bullish. Clearly, it's my livelihood. It's everything we do. But I think that it's gonna continue rising, and I think that niche and very focused. Businesses that are very niche and focused on something specific, like what Zach was just mentioning here, I think are going to win in the present and the future increasingly.
Yeah, I think the word bullish is probably the safest word when I think about it, because, again, to your point of exactly going with the grain, like we realized very quickly that we could spend $5,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 for a marketing campaign to get out to 10,000 mailboxes and get these letters in that I'm sure every single person listening has received. Come by the dealership, get a gift card. Come by the dealership, get a free oil change. or I could do a 10-minute skit that cuts down to a 60-second max video, post on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Reels, and I could then get it shared by the 20 sales associates on my sales floor plus the leaders. And I'm in 10,000 phones in the next 10 seconds. And that's the power that we found is like getting the team behind engagement as well and finding that opportunity to solicit and share with consumers that really is that power base that you talk about day one in the auto industry of like sell your family and friends. Well, how are we marketing to them as well? And back to obviously the consumer data through that survey, I think it's so spot on of like going to an Edmunds when you're down funnel to solidify that this is the right decision and using social media such as YouTube to confirm what the consumer report says. What's the market show? What's it at? And then using TikTok, quick social media to even discover what's out there.
Yeah, that makes sense. If anyone's curious, dealer websites were tied with social media at 14%. So that also has an impact on a purchase decision, and manufacturer websites were at 10%. So they came in last. Apparently people are less excited about going to Ford.com than TikTok.
And you know what's funny? Like, it makes total sense to me, right? Because think about it. You go to the manufacturer's website, it feels so impersonal. Like I can get, not all, but I can get a lot of the information already on, on social, right? Companies, there's plenty of companies, of course, Edmunds, right? You'll take that, you'll have your team create all this other content. So it does feel like that also, I would say that doesn't surprise me because it's like the most impersonal destination for consuming that content. And it's also the most like produced, right? You don't get really like authentic and raw takes. So I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so going along.
All right, hit us. What we got next?
Okay, so going along those lines, we asked them, has an ad swayed you to consider another brand? Pretty split here. 46% said yes. I think that's pretty, that's pretty. I mean, I wouldn't say it's surprising, but when you think about the gravity of a vehicle purchase, it's not like I saw an ad for like a cool sweater on Instagram and then I bought it for $20. This is a vehicle that's, as we just talked about, a lot of money and a multi-year commitment to. So I think that portion is interesting. But so if those people that did say yes, where did you see the ad? 28% said YouTube. 26% said social media, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit. Traditional TV down to 12%. So big difference. I think it just shows the showing world between what people are looking at on traditional media versus the social media, because that is a big jump. And this survey was fielded across all age groups to match the US population. So it's not just a bunch of young people saying, yeah, I saw social media. But I thought that was interesting as well. So when you're thinking about like shopping a car, like what you're going to buy, the number one thing that people had cited was most important, and these consumers were forced to rank these, so rank them against each other. So the thing that came up first was safety, so airbags, collision, crash systems, and then fuel economy. That was pretty a close second. Then performance, comfort, design, technology, and then lastly was the driver assistance type features. So basically people are saying that safety is the most important to them, and then also fuel economy. So I would say very pragmatic responses. But it kind of goes to, I mean, what my sentiment is, you're filling out a survey. I feel like you probably, if you have a family and your safety is not important, it feels like a bit of a jerk move,
Stated versus revealed preferences for sure. It's funny because I had this post I used to make, right? Which is like, all you need nowadays to sell a car is 4 wheels and Apple CarPlay or something like that. It wasn't exactly that, because they're definitely not true. But it was supposed to be like a joking at the fact that people just kept requesting Apple CarPlay in the car, or like, oh, I don't want it. It doesn't have CarPlay. And so I'm actually surprised that technology is not higher up on that list. But again, they might be saying one thing and doing another thing, like, oh yeah, safety, right? I care about my family. I got to do safety. But then when the push comes to shove, they're like, give me the car with the best technology. That's what I want first. So, I'd be curious to know how that works. And then I will tell you, right? I posted about like a month ago, I think it was a month ago, about test driving a Tesla with the latest full self-driving. And I had a really, really great experience. Like it was just it worked phenomenally for me. And I wrote about it like really, really objectively. This is really great technology as far, and based on, the limited driving I did. So, I'm sure other people in maybe different, less metro areas maybe had a different experience. But all that said is that if I had to make some predictions, again, putting stated versus revealed preferences aside, I do think that this like driver's assistance, self-driving stuff, it will rise in just the coming for like 5-10 years. Because I know that, my experience was very positive, and I could see consumers increasingly demanding this, in a way that would fall under technology, I guess. But again, just another personal experience on my end.
Yeah. I mean, I think that these are very pragmatic responses, but as we know, like car buying is an emotional process. It's not like you go in there without any emotion. All of a sudden you see the interior, you imagine your life in that, and all of a sudden the vehicle's sold, right? It's not about so much about it has X amount of airbags. I think so. It's very different. So I think that in terms of like how maybe you communicate to shoppers that are, haven't even started the process or just starting the process, kind of looking around, maybe looking for different cues of what actually sells at the dealership when they are there physically, which I imagine may be a little bit different. And the last one I think I just wanted to share with you guys was time to research vehicle purchase, because this is sort of all over the board when we looked at the response. So how long are you taking to actively research before you purchase? 15% said less than 30 days. 40%, which was the largest group, said 1 to 3 months. I think that's pretty in line. But then you have this group that is 3 to 6 months at 28%. And then pretty much it kind of really goes down from there. 6 to 9 months, 5%, 9+ months, 5%. And then 7% of people say that they're just always out there looking at vehicles. How do you kind of given that it's such a long time frame, is it challenging to keep in front of a consumer this whole time? Because you have people that are kind of immediate, but then you have people probably looking at when is their lease term end? When is their loan term end? Maybe a year from now, and trying to, keep in front of them to keep your dealership at top of mind. Is there, any way that you market especially to those folks, Zach?
I think that's how we're looking at the social media podcast kind of thing, is how do we stay relative to them at their timeline, their time pace. But I think also the other side is when a consumer makes a decision to do something, they move pretty quick. One of the beauties of the Techion DMS CRM that we're on right now is that it actually tracks lead to sale time. And it's a little clearer than other DMSs or CRMs we've been in, because they're sharing the same platform. It's not going between one platform tool to another. So for us, we're surprised that by the time a lead comes in, a consumer comes in as a true lead from whatever third party, our dealership website, it's truly like a 24-hour window before they're in the showroom and another 24 hours before the car's in their driveway. So we're sub 48 hours. I think the last time I looked was like 42 hours from lead in to delivery. And our store historically closes around like 18 to 22% monthly on those internet leads. So we've been very aggressive, very strong in it, but it's surprising to see once they make that decision to go there. But we know that the average for what we've always said in store is 19 days of research before ever hand raising to say, I want more data. Let's do this buying process. So yeah, to hear your report say it could be even 2 to 3 months, that's somewhat surprising, but still known in that same sense as well.
Zach, thinking about the in-store experience, thinking about the dealership, what are you most excited about for the remainder of the year? Right? Is there any trend? Is there anything specific you're seeing that you're thinking about it positively, or is leading you to be pretty optimistic about where our industry's headed?
Yeah, I think the automotive industry as a whole, the transparency factor is being pushed for the first time, I think, where everybody's getting on that train no matter what. Whether you like it or not, get on it, because the internet's always been there to reveal some of that. But also, I think the market shift is occurring where now it is about speed. It's not about your sales skills. It's about availability. It's about what can you do for me, not come on in and let me show you what I could do in that scenario. The other side of it for us specifically, we're really excited about the new Land Cruiser that's just launching, the 4Runner. Those are both cult followings that, people have been dying to see both come back and be redesigned. And we have our first Land Cruiser on the ground. The consumer's coming to pick it up. The reservation process on those are insane because you don't know what you're getting. So we have people that have confirmed that they're willing to pay between $55,000 and $76,000 sales price because they don't know what trim, make, model they're getting. They're just hand raising saying, I want it in my driveway and I'll be good with whatever I get. So it is a different clientele that we're excited to welcome back to the automotive industry, as they've kind of been put on the back burner with the 4Runner not being redesigned and the Land Cruiser being sunset, and then brought back and now back into showrooms around the United States. So definitely excited about both those.
Good stuff. Looking forward to it. Jessica Caldwell from Edmunds. We got Zach Kinch from Bob Rohrman Toyota. Thanks for coming on. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.